Okay. Alright.
Hey.
In our last session, it's talking about self-care and like ways to avoid burnout.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Um, well, for starters, I want to kind of diversify my actual practice so that I'm not just seeing patients one on or clients rather one on one every day. So I might do, and also maybe not packing it in too much. So, like, I don't know. There must be a very good reason why 50 minutes is the standard length of time, but
Mhm.
my current therapist does an hour with me. And I actually really like that. And so I've been thinking I might try doing an hour with clients with 15 minutes padding between,
Mhm.
and then maybe give myself like an hour and a half in the middle of the day. Um, like not just to eat really quickly, but like to eat and go for a walk or to eat and do an errand.
Mhm.
And then also maybe have group therapy. And because I'm planning to be a psychedelic therapist, to have one day a week that's just devoted to people who want to do journey work.
Yeah.
Um, And so I wanna diversify my week in that way, for starters, just because I think seeing back-to-back clients 40 hours a week does not sound sustainable for me personally. I have more to say, but let me pass it to you so you can.
Yeah, I feel similar where, my practicum's gonna be at a school, so I for sure am like wondering what that would look like if I decide to stay working as a school counselor. Like if I'll have like more of a free reign with my scheduling or not. Cause for me, I'm like, if I could live comfortably not working 40 hours, I would love to not work 40 hours a week. Like I would love if I could just work 3 days a week in the future because yeah, I feel that a lot where I'm like everyone talks a lot about burnout being a therapist and I'm like but there has to be ways to avoid as much as we can getting there because it's like I don't want to be a therapist that is so tired that I'm not really like what am I doing for the client, you know?
Yeah.
And I like the idea of yeah, like having a time in the middle of the day that's not just like 20 minutes is just like oh I could unpack a little bit of how I'm feeling and also like have time to eat without it feeling like it's super rushed just like everything. Yeah, everyone's like well make sure you could do more with like your 15 minutes between clients and I'm just like that sounds crazy. um So, yeah, I think I always it really depends on if in the future I'll be doing private practice work or not, I guess. Um, but yeah, I like the idea of being able to do it so that it's not just like one continuous day, like you're saying, like kind of breaking it up and also, yeah, doing group therapy versus individual. Um, Yeah, I think a lot about like my own self-care and like what I do to just like kind of unwind for when I'm like just a regular basis. And I'm like, do I need to switch up from just like sitting down and reading or like watching a movie I want to watch or going on a walk? Um, yeah, I'm like, is there more intensive self-care that I should be doing to avoid burnout? But I haven't gotten to that answer yet.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then yeah, sounds like we're on similar pages there. And then as far as when I'm not at work, how to sort of feed the, what do you call it? Like feed, there's like a wasp or something stuck in the blinds above me, and it's a bit distracting. That's why I muted myself. It's very noisy. Um, how to replenish myself in between is something also that
Mhm.
um I feel like I already have a lot of those practices, so I'm not too worried about that. I already like go for a hike several times a week or go to yoga several times a week and um like go out, just be outdoors in nature. And also I do my own medicine work about once a month, and I get to process a lot of uh stuff that I've been holding, some of which is very historical, and then some of which, is happening in present time. And so that's very helpful for me as well. Um, and yeah, I think the one thing that feels like I want to learn more about how to support myself is that, as a very sensitive person, um, what happens when I, have like a week where I've got multiple clients who are coming in with like really big stuff, and who I think I've been noticing that like when people become very dysregulated with me, I really feel it in my body a lot. So that's something that I'm very I have some concern about. So, again, I think like movement is going to be very important, movement practices for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also something I thought about a lot where um yeah, I've had a like a really kind of hostile environment when I was a kid, so I definitely fed off energy a lot, and I'm also like a highly sensitive person. So I'm like, how will it be if I get super triggered in a session and then I only have 15 minutes to kind of like reel it in and make sure I'm regulated for the next person? And I've learned some tools through being in therapy or even just being in school, but I learning it versus like actually putting it into practice, I think is where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm very self-aware of myself, but I'm like, I can't just tell a client like, wait, I have to like take 10 minutes to like make sure I'm not like heightening myself for you. So yeah, I think that's where I'm also feeling kind of nervous about it.
Hmm. I'm, I'll share something which is really like, it's adjacent to what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And then I'm just curious what your experience is with this. But like recently, like there's a friend who, she's just, I guess there's a lot of like trauma that has been seeming very present for her. And sometimes I feel a bit caught off guard by her. Now, it's different when you're in a therapeutic container and you're sitting down knowing that people are going to be coming in with this. But like, for instance, this friend of mine, like, there's been times where I'll just invite her over for dinner and I'll have prepared like a lovely dinner. And then she comes over and then like she's in a highly, highly activated state. And like like basically we have to spend like 2 hours talking about her thing and helping her regulate and then having dinner. I remember this happening recently and I was like, the dinner was really dried out by the time we ate it. And I've been noticing like, well, I'm finding myself feeling uh frustrated by that. And so I'm going, well, does this mean like I'm not going to be very good at holding space as a therapist for for like this level of dysregulation? And I don't know because I'm like, well, she's my friend and this is not a therapeutic container. So like, is it going to be different when it is a therapeutic container? Um, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely had those like same type of friendships before where I do think it's different because it's you do have a totally different relationship with this person.
Yeah.
And, this is not your situation, but for me, I've had friends where it's very one-sided and they very much put all of that on me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've also had that even just being in a school for going to be a therapist where people now think like, well, you're going to be a therapist. So like, I'm going to give you therapy things to do.
Hmm.
And I think it adds like a level where, yeah, it's complicated, I guess, because I think it is the fact that it's a different relationship that that for me, I'm like, if that was me, I would feel like that would be the block where I'm like, oh, I feel like almost like this kind of takes away from our friendship time together. And then
Yeah.
that's where like you might not feel as like willing to want to help regulate this person versus like, yeah, you're in a therapeutic container and maybe I feel like when I've done like faux sessions with classmates, like I automatically go into that kind of mind state and I'm like a different person almost sometimes when I'm a therapist.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do get those moments though, especially when I get dysregulated by my friend who's dysregulated and I'm just like, how do I become the regulated person to like kind of take them back to being regulated too? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Is
Mhm.
there like, I mean, is there a sense in which it's like in my friendships, isn't it? I'm like, isn't it fair for me to say, I don't want my friendships to look like this? Like,
Yeah.
and like, um, this is not what I sign up for in a friendship. Like, if it happens once in a while, like that's one thing. But if it's kind of like a tendency, I feel a little, uh, what's the word? Not cornered, but yeah, like entrapped. It feels a little like entrapment somehow.
Mhm.
Whereas when we're walking into a clinical space, we're, we've signed up for this and we're being compensated for our time
Mhm.
and we can prepare ourselves um
Yeah,
psychically.
I think like
Mhm.
I have friends now who I'm comfortable. Like I ask them, I'm like, hey, something big happened to me. Like, do you have the capacity to talk about it? And then they ask me
Yeah.
that question too, because
Yes.
if they're also highly sensitive, we're more aware of like, hey, I want to make sure you're able to talk about this thing. 'Cause
Yes.
I've definitely had friendships where we're not friends anymore because I've tried to like put boundaries in the relationship around that and they like cannot deal with it. And I'm like, okay, well, I think we just can't be friends then if you can't like take into consideration that this also like has a toll on me as well. Cause
Hmm.
I think that does fit into our topic too, because that is a form of self-care is to have like boundaries outside of like how you're going to be as a therapist, right? Like,
Yes.
um,
Right.
and making sure that, like, your other relationships are fulfilling, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Because we need to, I don't know, we need to be able to nurture and sustain ourselves in between the time that we're coming to sit in the therapist chair.
Yeah, definitely. 'Cause,
Mhm.
I even have thought about little things, like, I have, like, on and off insomnia, so I'm like, what if there's, like, a day where I have a really hard time sleeping and then I have to go do therapy the next day? Like, how is that going to affect how I am as a therapist? But then I'm also trying to be like, well, I'm also a person, so I'm not gonna be
Right.
perfect regardless.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like a very big balance of like making
Mhm.
sure I'm also gentle on myself.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think over the years I've had like really good boundaries with like workplaces, but I think I have to be like extra careful being a therapist because it's something about like, well, I want to make sure I'm like helping the person. So I'll like make sure not to go against my own boundaries, I guess.
Yeah.
The thing I was thinking about a lot.
Yeah. Good
Yeah.
for you for
I mean, yeah.
for prioritizing that and being able to stand in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I mean, again, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm thinking all these things. I have to make sure I put them into practice, especially if I'm going to be like having a supervisor that might want more from me than I can give, or like, like it's just also, yeah, maybe at some point having a private practice would be amazing because then I
Mhm.
have to like have other people to kind of have to put boundaries with all the time. but at least like as a higher management person or whatever, you know.
Mm, yes. Yeah. And then there's also another support system, which I look forward to cultivating, is having, well, not just a, well, after having, right, in the beginning we have supervisor, and then later we can have a consultant. Is that what we call it when we have like someone who kind of, we can see who's a sort of a senior therapist?
Yeah.
Um, and then, but I also am really attracted to the idea of having like uh, a group of colleagues that we meet on a regular basis to discuss cases.
Mhm.
That really turns me on. I really like that. I think that can be both really supportive and helpful for my growth as a therapist, and also um, for just feeling a sense of support, like emotional support.
Yeah, I definitely feel similar where even when I just talk to like my friends who aren't in school with me about like school, I feel like I'm being so boring. But like if I talk to people who are in school with me, we're on the same page because it's like a community.
Yeah.
So I feel, yeah, like having that support where I could actually be like, hey, how do I get help on something? Slash like you are in the same boat as me. So like we understand each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that because I think when I was initially going into school, I was like, "Oh, I have to when I'm done with this, be a therapist," and that's like super scary.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, other people are gonna be in the same boat as me, and yeah, even I'm gonna be in my practicum orientation in a couple weeks, and I like I'm on like an email chain with all the other people, and I'm like, oh, there's gonna be like a lot of us, so I'll have like a lot of other people I could talk to, which is awesome. Um,
Exciting. I'm excited for you that you get to start practicum.
yeah, definitely. I'm like, okay, I have to be prepared, but I'm not prepared at the same time. Um, but yeah, that was another thing when thinking about self-care is I'm very much like an ambivert type of person. So like I'll go and socialize, but I need a lot of alone time after.
Yeah.
Even when we would do the retreats for school, I'm like, oh, I have to see people for like 6 days straight. That's like insane. And then I need like a whole week to kind of like not see anyone at all.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I'm like, how am I going to balance like having a lot of clients and then also having alone time, but also having social time, have
Hmm.
like a partner. Yeah, it's a whole
Yeah.
whole thing.
A lot.
It's like
Yeah.
24 hours are definitely not enough hours in a day, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some weeks will be better than others.
Yeah, that's a good way
Yeah.
to view it, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else that you want to bring into this conversation?
Um, no, I feel like I mean, we could talk about it forever, but yeah, I think we well rounded our last conversation together.
Good. All right. Cool. Well, congratulations on starting your practicum,
Thank
and it
you.
was great working with you this semester.
Yeah, you too.